In the last video, I said this.
I have a lot to say about this moment, the reasons behind why it's happening and the potential consequences, but I'm afraid I'll be saving that discussion for the next analysis where I can properly explain myself. But for now, I will say that it might have some negative implications for the climax of the entire season.
And I'll be honest, I didn't expect that line to garner so much attention, but it did. So here we are. It's time for me to explain the idea I've had about this show since I first watched episode 10. A thought that has been leaving me tense and nervous about what I would be endorsing had I ignored it. All that and more in this analysis of Treasure Hunting, a story you can find 15 minutes into episode 10 and is based on the manga's 43rd chapter. I'm going to start this analysis the way all good Takagi-san analysis videos start, by ranting about the video games industry. Don't worry, I promise I'm going somewhere with this. I'm a bit of a traditionalist when it comes to microtransactions. I believe that if you have to pay upfront for a game, you should not be charged any more for that game unless it is for substantial DLC. Of course, in the current climate, it seems like the biggest games are built from the ground up to encourage extra spending. And these slimy practices have their defenders, but how? Well, the most common tactic used by sketchy game publishers in the 2010s was to take monetization too far, apologize, and walk back on the practice enough so that the majority of players would stop complaining, but not back to where they were. EA's Star Wars Battlefront 2 was not an accident, it was a threat. A statement about how far they were willing to go to coerce money out of its player base, and to this day its cynical nature is used to defend games that do not show as much contempt for their audiences, even when contempt is there. It could be worse is currently a popular defense for these kind of practices, but I have always believed that that excuse held no water. Cynical monetization cannot be justified by comparing it to more cynical monetization any more than a punch to the stomach can be justified by comparing it to a punch in the face. Like, you've still punched me in the stomach. The hell is wrong with you? So what does any of this have to do with Takagi-san? Well, as you are all aware, the moment in which all of Nishikata's development culminates is a moment in which he willingly holds Takagi's hand. As I will go on to explain in the Summer Festival analysis, there are many reasons that he does this. Many reasons that reflect his growth throughout the series and still maintains his agency in the situation. But what I'm worried about is that one of the reasons he makes this leap is because it could be worse. If Nishikata holds Takagi's hand thinking, at least I'm not kissing her, then he has been manipulated. It strips this moment of some of its importance and takes away from Nishikata's implied development in this scene. But why would he be thinking about kissing her at this moment? Well, because of the final scene of Treasure Hunting, where Takagi tricks Nishikata into thinking she is about to do just that. Could Takagi have manipulated Nishikata into being more comfortable with hand-holding by implicitly comparing it to the far more intimate act of kissing? Was this pretend kiss attempt a threat, like EA's Battlefront 2 was? Now, I've used the term manipulation many times in this analysis series, and rightfully so. Takagi is very good at manipulating Nishikata. The most prominent example that comes to mind is when she had him thinking about periods and breasts in pool. It wasn't a coincidence that Takagi knew what he was thinking about, she deliberately put those thoughts into his head. The difference is that Takagi's manipulation usually serves to give her an edge in their competitions and games, which are inconsequential in the long run and therefore pretty much harmless. However, manipulating Nishikata into a moment of long-term character growth like this is crossing a line that I cannot and will not defend. If everything I've said up to this point is true, this sweet slice of life romance becomes a story of a boy being tricked into loving a master of manipulation, and that is not a show I want to endorse or celebrate in any way, shape, or form. However, this is all assuming that Takagi wanted to manipulate Nishikata in this way, or that this interaction had that kind of effect on Nishikata at all. Well, to work that out, we need to pay close attention to what happens in the rest of the story. During the walk to the marked location, Nishikata thinks about how Takagi is acting like a kid, just like he had done in Bicycle, albeit with much less enthusiasm. Which makes sense. In Bicycle, he considered it to be an aspect of her personality that could give him an edge in their game, given that immediately afterwards he wonders if this is a ruse to put him off guard. In this instance, however, he laments that he doesn't understand her as well as he would like to, putting the idea into his head that he could know her better. During the search, she even upholds the status quo by lightly teasing him about what the treasure could be. When they get to the spot and discover the significance it had to the people who made the map, Takagi suggests that they stay and then leans in as if she is about to kiss him, which is exactly what Nishikata believes is about to happen. YouTube user Jazero pointed out that Takagi's actions in hide and seek were more ambiguous than I said they were, that we cannot be sure if it was a kiss attempt or a hand-holding attempt. But if that moment didn't put kissing into Nishikata's mind, then this moment certainly does. The big question is why? Why does Takagi pretend to try and kiss Nishikata? What is her motivation behind this action, and what are the consequences for Nishikata? Well, looking at this moment in a bubble, you could argue that her motivation was to manipulate him, as I had said at the beginning of this video. However, something important that I have realized in writing this analysis is that this moment does not exist in a bubble. It comes after they have gone on an adventure together, in which Takagi has both humanized herself for Nishikata and maintained the status quo with some light-hearted teasing. I would argue that Takagi's ultimate goal is to have more adventures like these, and to one day end them with a big show of intimacy when she and Nishikata are properly together. The fake kiss attempt is less a threat along the lines of this is how bad things could be, and more a fantasy pitch along the lines of this is how great things can be. Takagi already has Nishikata in a mindset where he wants to know more about her, so this is the perfect opportunity to plant some seeds of intimacy in his mind. As for the consequences it has for Nishikata, he seemingly lets it fade into the background along with all her other teasing attempts. Kissing is not on the table for him right now, just like hand-holding wasn't at the start of the season. As an audience, I can read Nishikata's mind. If this kiss attempt had bothered him or dramatically changed his perspective, we would likely find hints of that in his dialogue or behaviour going forward, but no such hints can be found. In the end, the only side effect that this stunt had was briefly forcing Nishikata to think about Takagi romantically, perhaps guiding him to become more used to the idea. Had Takagi been trying to genuinely manipulate Nishikata, she would have let him stew in that moment, but just like she does in Water Tap and Nurse's Office, she pumps the brakes and allows his mind to return to the rivalry aspect of their relationship when she plays him a catfight with her phone. Until writing this analysis, I would have been sure that the fake kiss was the ultimate moment in the story, but now I can't decide if the attention should go to it or the moment that happens right afterwards. In the end, Nishikata is reluctant to share headphones with Takagi because people might think they are romantically involved. When Takagi tricks Nishikata into taking the headphone, she says, "I don't mind," referring to his previously mentioned concern. And what song do they then listen to? What song plays us through the credits? Iwanai Kedo Ne, the song that starts with the line, "I don't mind anybody getting the wrong idea as long as it is with you." In my first impressions video, I said that the running theme throughout episode 10 was kissing, but after referencing Iwanai Kedo Ne 2 videos in a row, I've been able to connect the dots between Takagi not caring that Yukari walked in on them, her comments in hide and seek, and this statement right here. I've realized that the running theme is Takagi showing Nishikata that she doesn't mind people seeing them through a romantic lens, because that is also how she sees them. But obviously, Nishikata isn't on the same page yet. Part of what I love about this show is that Takagi is never necessarily forceful in regards to her romantic interests in Nishikata. Her strategy from the beginning has seemingly been to gently guide him towards accepting the feelings that he already has. The premise of this show would have never worked if Nishikata didn't genuinely like Takagi. She isn't aggressive enough to change his mind, but she doesn't have to be. She only needs to guide him gently to accept his romantic feelings for her, because those feelings already naturally exist within him. And that is it for this analysis. A big welcome to Lars Epson, who has joined Orion Tran and Quincy Chamberlain as a patron. If you'd like to join Orion, Quincy and Lars, or the fine folks on the Discord server, you can do so via links in the description. If you want to see the outtakes for this video, including some commentary on the writing process, you can do so on my Patreon for free or on the Discord server. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time.